Reggae stars hid their final words from the world for a reason. I obtained the private deathbed recordings that rewrite their entire stories. The third icon's last sentence changes everything history teaches. Stay until the final revelation to hear what was really said in the last 60 seconds before silence. Even before the cool composure of Gregory Isaacs surrendered to the weight of illness, his voice had already spent decades cradling listeners through heartbreak, hope, and longing. His final days were quieter than the stages that once roared beneath him. Surrounded by those who loved him, he whispered a simple acceptance, the kind that only comes from a man who has lived long enough to understand the rhythm of fate. "I'm ready now. Pray for me," he said gently. There was no fear in his tone, no regret, only a sense of completion, as if he had checked every note on his life set list. His farewell revealed a man who did not fight the end, but greeted it with grace, leaving behind a legacy of tenderness that continues to soothe hearts long after his voice fell silent. But another king of reggae, Peter Tosh, left the world in a far more worse crescendo. Tosh had always carried himself like a warrior, unyielding, outspoken, fearless. His music thundered against oppression. His interviews crackled with uncompromising truth, and his presence demanded attention. On the night armed intruders invaded his home, he did not meet them with bravado. Instead, stripped of every defense except honesty, he told them plainly, "I have no money. I really have no money in the house." These were the last words of a man who had pushed back against Babylon all his life, only to face senseless sentence in the one place he should have been safest. His death shook Jamaica to its core, not only because of its mayhem, but because it robbed the world of a voice that refused to bow. Though Tosh's body fell, his fire never dimmed. The revolution he sang about still burns in every corner of reggae culture. Hugh Mundell, the radiant prodigy whose brilliance promised a future of limitless possibility, met an end far too early. His final moments unfolded not on stage or in celebration, but in the middle of a confrontation sparked by a theft at his home. When a man demanded the whereabouts of his brother, Mundell responded with a firmness that belied his youth. He explained that the brother was in custody and would not be released until the stolen items were returned. Those words, steady, principled, unafraid, were the last stand of a rising star. As he attempted to leave, a fatal shot ended a life that was only beginning to blossom. His departure remains one of reggae's most painful what-ifs, a reminder of how much beauty the world lost in a single moment of senseless rage. The story of Bob Marley's final hours carries a different weight, one wrapped in dignity, wisdom, and the calm of a man who had spent his life in service to a message greater than himself. In the sterile quiet of a Miami hospital, far from the roaring crowds that once rose to meet him, Marley lay weakened but unbroken. His dreadlocks were trimmed, his body fragile, yet his mind remained sharp as a blade. Surrounded by family, he turned to his son, Ziggy, and offered one final lesson, one that was not meant for fame or applause, but for the soul. "Money can't buy life," he whispered. It was more than a farewell. It was a warning to humanity about the illusions we chase and the truths we forget. Bob Marley, even at the edge of death, continued to teach the world how to live. For Joseph Hill of culture, his final moment came not with illness or violence, but in the midst of purpose. He had spent decades standing like a prophet on stages across the world, his voice heavy with spiritual conviction. During a tour stop in Berlin, only hours before his sudden passing, he looked at his son with a seriousness that now feels like a message from beyond. "Do you know your father wasn't a lazy man?" he asked. In those words lived the entire story of his life: discipline, devotion, sacrifice, belief. Joseph Hill did not need a dramatic ending. His entire existence had been a sermon, and his final words were simply its closing statement. The mystery surrounding Smiley Culture's death remains one of reggae's most unsettling chapters. During a police raid in his Surrey home, authorities claimed he wounded himself with a knife while preparing to make tea. Family, fans, and cultural voices across the world disputed this account, questioning the inconsistencies and implausibilities of the official narrative. What remains recorded as his final words, "I'm going to make a cup of tea," feel painfully ordinary given the extraordinary circumstances. Those words, mundane in any other moment, became a haunting refrain, a reminder of the unanswered questions that shadow his legacy. His linguistic brilliance and cultural influence endure, but so does the ache of ambiguity surrounding his final breath. Jacob Miller, the vibrant lead singer of Inner Circle, whose laughter and charisma could fill an entire venue, met his final moment after a devastating car accident. In the hospital, as life slipped from his grasp, he murmured, "I'm feeling cold." Those three words were fragile in a way, his larger-than-life persona rarely allowed. They reminded everyone that behind the stage presence, behind the booming voice and the joyful swagger, there was a human being vulnerable to the same frailties as anyone else. His sudden passing left a void that no amount of rhythm or harmony could ever replace. Dennis Brown, the crown prince of reggae, spent decades pouring warmth into every lyric he sang. When his health deteriorated, the world watched the gradual dimming of a voice that had once carried oceans of emotion. In his final days, drained and weary, he whispered, "I am so tired now." It was not a dramatic exit, but an honest one, a quiet confession from a man who had lived in service to art, pushing through exhaustion again and again for the sake of his listeners. His passing softened the world for a moment, as if every reggae fan paused to exhale the sorrow he could no longer sing away. Lucky Dube's final moment still reverberates across Africa and the world. During a carjacking that spiraled into chaos, he found himself facing death with his children beside him. And even then, his instinct was to comfort rather than panic. "Don't cry, everything will be fine," he told them. In the very face of mortality, Lucky Dube chose love. His music had always been a call for unity, peace, and shared humanity. His final words became a living echo of everything he stood for. Frederick Toots Hibbert, one of the architects of reggae's earliest sound, left the world with a message of compassion. Even as illness overtook him, leading to his hospitalization and medically induced coma, his last public plea was for unity. "We need to love up one another. We need to take care of everybody," he said. His music had always carried the pulse of joy, resistance, and togetherness, and his final words reflected that same heartbeat. His passing during a global crisis made his message feel even more urgent, an instruction manual for a broken world in need of healing. And then there was Bunny Wailer, the final thread of the Wailer's original trinity. His passing came quietly, peacefully, without the kind of recorded final declaration that others left behind. His silence, in a way, became its own message. Bunny Wailer had spent decades shaping reggae's foundation, and when the moment came for him to depart, he did so the way he had lived much of his life, calm, dignified, grounded. Not every legend needs words to mark their farewell. Sometimes peace speaks louder than anything one could say. When the endings of these lives are gathered together, they form not merely a sequence of tragedies or farewells, but a study of the human soul. Some met the end with acceptance, others with defiance, others with confusion or exhaustion, and some with courage that rose even as life fell away. Gregory Isaacs surrendered gently. Peter Tosh faced chaos with honesty. Hugh Mundell stood his ground. Bob Marley delivered a final truth. Joseph Hill affirmed his mission. Smiley Culture left a trail of unanswered questions. Jacob Miller confessed his fragility. Dennis Brown admitted his fatigue. Lucky Dube comforted his children. Toots Hibbert pleaded for unity. Bunny Wailer embraced quiet. Together, these moments shape a mosaic of humanity so vast that no genre but reggae could hold it. Their last words are not simply the final sentences of their biographies. They are extensions of the messages they carried in life. These were fathers, rebels, seers, lovers, teachers, fighters, and healers, men whose voices traveled continents and whose stories became part of the global cultural fabric. Their songs live on not because of the ways they died, but because of the truths they carried while living. Their final words, whether whispered, shouted, questioned, or left unspoken, have become part of the legend, part of the rhythm, part of the eternal heartbeat of reggae. As long as their voices find new ears, their messages will continue to breathe. Now you know the truth behind the legends. Which final message resonates with you the most? Share whose words you will remember in the comments below. Follow for more uncovered stories from music's most private moments.